Welcome back to the Florida History Podcast. I'm Kartik Krishnaiyer.
And I'm Robert Buccellato.
So, picking up where we left off last week, Robert, toward the end of the Revolutionary War, you began to get refugees, loyalist refugees, to East Florida. Then it really intensifies after the Battle of Yorktown, which is still taught in American history as the decisive battle, the Franco-American victory at Yorktown as the decisive battle in the Revolutionary War. It was, in hindsight, the decisive battle that secured U.S. independence, but it was not the end of the war, as we're going to continue to talk about in these next few weeks. It was not the end of the war at all. But after Yorktown in 1782, you have 6,000 refugees alone fleeing to East Florida. And all of this, and I think we left off in the last episode talking about the population of St. Augustine had gone from 3,000, a small colonial outpost at the beginning of the Revolutionary War, to 15,000, which made it one of, by 1782, which made it one of the largest settlements in North America. And so this caused all kinds of logistical trouble.
No, and I mean, logistically, it was a nightmare. And you had the whole length and breadth of Tory America basically running through that place, trying to find ways to either go back home or to settle in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, and it was bedlam. And they really didn't even have the ability to meet the housing issues, the food needs of these people that were basically, some of them were well off, but a large number of them were just scared refugees that were leaving everything behind. Now, the merchants of St. Augustine loved it. They had a great time. The price gougers adored the situation. But for most people that were terrified because of the propaganda that George Washington and his rebels, they were gonna kill you. They were running scared from the Carolinas and from up north, and they came to this place looking for passage out of here, and some of them lived in really just horrible conditions while they waited to leave.
Yeah, and so this influx included many plantation owners who brought their slaves with them, free blacks who would run behind the British lines, and all of the loyalists, as you mentioned, that could get to Florida from the southern colonies. And in the meantime, the Spanish had captured the Bahamas, so Florida was sandwiched between these two Spanish territories, and then to the north, or sandwiched on three sides by Spanish territory, and to the north by Patriot American territory. So this is why Tonin was paranoid about the invasion that never came. And in fact, you had Floridians launch an invasion of liberation toward the to the Bahamas, and the Bahamas were liberated in 1782. But one of the really tragic stories of this period of time are the number of shipwrecks that took place because there were mass refugees seeking to come to Florida, to East Florida, come to St. Augustine. There's an ambiguity in the historic record, which is why I've had a hard time writing about this, and kind of glossed over the topic, I'll admit, in our writings. That there, it appears there was somewhere between 15 and 25 accidents, and dozens, perhaps hundreds of lives were lost. There was a particular shipwreck in December 1782, where 16 ships filled with loyalists, military, and cargo left. This is December 1782, left Charleston bound for St. Augustine, and they ran aground having trouble navigating the sandbar in the channel, which enters the harbor, the Matanzas River area in St. Augustine. It's still a very difficult place to navigate, which is why St. Augustine never became a major port, and Jacksonville to the north did. Um, Many of the ship goers were rescued, but all the cargo was lost. And there is some relics from these shipwrecks that you see in the Mel Fisher Museum in Sebastian, and then also in the Leitner Museum in St. Augustine. But wanted to mention also that the new town of St. John's Bluff on the St. John's River, which eventually becomes kind of the Mayport area now within Jacksonville, gets founded in this period of time, just, Robert, to absorb the refugees coming from the colonies to the north, the loyalists.
Yeah, and it must have been a very scary time. And for one, I'm glad that you included the shipwrecks, because people tend to forget that any time during this period in pre-navigation sea travel, people forget that there's always losses of life. There's always rushed journeys. There's always shipwrecks. And to me, I think that goes into the sort of the human civilian collateral damage that always seems to happen during these conflicts that we really don't talk about. And that was one of the things that I enjoyed the most about this section of the book, is that there's really no specific talk about battles. It's really the human aspect, those that have to live in the sort of edges of the chessboard of this conflict, and what they had to go through, what they had to experience, what hardships that they had to have. And I think it's also a reminder that when this revolution was taking place, the vast majority of citizens, at least for a very long time, were loyalists.
Yep.
So it really kind of adds to the narrative that's been happening recently of describing the Revolutionary War as not just a revolutionary war, but almost a forgotten civil war that took place here between, American and American.
Yep.
One American that was aided by the Spanish and the French in certain periods, and the other that was aided by Haitians and indigenous and British.
Yep. It was absolutely a cousins' war, as Kevin Phillips, the noted former Republican operative turned great analytical author and historic writer, a very famous critic of the Bush family. If you haven't read American Dynasty, you probably should if you don't like the Bushes.
I have not.
Yes. Yeah. So Kevin Phillips has talked about the Cousins Wars. And in fact, in his book, 1775, has talked a lot about Florida as part of this. Often glossed over by American Revolutionary historians who focus on the 13 colonies. And in fact, East Florida, which had been seen as a backwater before the war, now had as many people around its capital city, St. Augustine, as basically Boston had and New York had and Philly had, right? Philadelphia had, the three huge cities of the northern colonies. And more people than Charleston did, the largest, Charleston and Savannah, the two large cities in the southern colonies. So the town was thriving, as you said, for merchants. You had blacksmiths, bakers, shipbuilders relocating from Savannah and Charleston to St. Augustine. It was taking on this really vibrant cosmopolitan feel. A new newspaper sprung up, the East Florida Gazette, published by Dr. William Charles Wells, who had been a loyalist from Charleston, who had fled to St. Augustine and began printing the East Florida Gazette, and was the first daily newspaper ever published in what is now the state of Florida. And it was published until April of 1784, when the colony was about to be evacuated. So we're going to be back next week talking about the reconquest of the Bahamas, which was launched from East Florida, from St. Augustine, and then the week after about the final naval battle of the conflict. But then also, Robert, the week after, we're going to conclude the series talking about the Treaty of Paris and the hasty evacuation of East Florida.